This is part two of the advanced WLAN settings, and we have edited this network. We are under the networking sub-tab. Everything that we're going to see here is how a default pre-shared key WLAN is set once initially configured, and we're going to talk through each of these settings. The first thing that we're going to mention here are the question mark icons that you're going to see throughout some of these options. If you hover these, they're going to give you a little bit more detail about what these options provide. So just be on the lookout for those anytime you see them in the UI. Keep in mind that the default settings have been tuned for the most general deployments. So there are features in here that you could turn on that would negatively impact your environment. Try to keep in mind why you are turning a thing on or off. Is it to solve an issue or is it just to test out a feature? You just don't want to be randomly turning things on and off without an understanding of what it's going to impact. The first thing that we're going to talk about is Agile Multiband. So as you can see, it's disabled by default. And when we enable it, clients that support the use of Agile Multiband are going to be able to obtain neighbor report information once they join the WLAN. So this is going to help those clients in cases where they need to roam. They won't have to go off channel. They'll already have an outline of what the environment looks like, so they'll be able to make a quicker roam decision. 802.11k neighbor reports are enabled by default. This allows the APs to exchange neighbor information, which they can then share with clients, all again to help make those roaming decisions. 802.11d is also enabled by default, and it's used for older devices to obtain channel information and country-specific information for the WLAN. This is required to be enabled in the Americas, Europe, Japan, China, Israel, Singapore, and Taiwan. 802.11r fast BSS transition helps devices that support 802.11r transition quickly, especially when they have already performed some type of authentication for the WLAN. So if we think about an 802.1x network where they have had to process a username and password, instead of having to do that again when they roam, if those devices are capable, they can go ahead and just exchange security keys and not have to re-authenticate. When you do enable this, you are presented with a mobility domain ID, so you need to make sure that that domain ID would match throughout the WLAN. The client inactivity timeout specifies the number of seconds in which a client must be idle before they're disconnected from the network. The default value of 120 seconds may be low depending on the environment type. In a guest environment, this might be okay, but if you have a known environment with a bunch of stationary devices, you might want to increase this inactivity timeout to prevent accidental disconnections. With a directed multicast broadcast threshold of 5, the AP is going to convert any broadcast traffic destined for the WLAN to unicast, as long as there are 5 or less clients per radio. So again, if we get to where we have 6 clients, we're going to stop doing that conversion to unicast and go ahead and send that out as broadcast to the WLAN. This is meant to help kind of alleviate that broadcast unless there are a lot of clients to take advantage of it. Airtime decongestion is disabled by default, and when you enable it, you lose the ability to set a join RSSI threshold. That's because when you enable airtime decongestion, each AP is maintaining its own SNR threshold to reply to probe requests. The idea of airtime decongestion is to cut down on management frame responses, so it kind of looks at other APs that it can hear and sets its own SNR threshold for how it can respond to clients. This is very helpful in large environments with many APs and many clients, so we can cut down on that management frame traffic. If we enable the join RSSI threshold, we are specifying the minimum signal that the client should be capable of before being allowed to join the WLAN. You can see here that we're representing that number with a negative decibel milliwatt value, and negative 85 is kind of the minimum that you would want to set this to. It's what you're going to see there by default. Clients that are capable of negative 85 dBm are going to have a connection, but it's not going to be the strongest signal. It's going to be near the edge of coverage. If you see something around negative 67, that's going to be a pretty strong signal. And anything around 55 is going to be a very strong signal. Transient client management is all about making sure the devices are in the environment for a period of time before letting them join the network. So you're going to see this enabled on WLANs where there's a lot of passerby traffic. Maybe devices are going to try to automatically attach, but you want to prevent that. So you would enable transient client management. You can see when we do that, we are given some additional configurations of join wait time, join expire time, and join wait threshold. So using these, you can tune how long a client has to be in the area before they would be able to join the WLAN. Optimized Connectivity Experience, or OCE, does require both the client device and the AP to support it. When you enable this, you're given two additional configuration parameters for broadcast probe response delay, as well as RSSI-based association rejection. The idea of OCE is to allow an AP to respond to multiple probe requests in a broadcast fashion. So in a large environment where you have an influx of client devices trying to join, rather than responding to each of those via a unicast probe response, it's going to wait 15 milliseconds and go ahead and send a broadcast probe response to all of those devices, which is going to help cut down again on that management traffic and give better airtime utilization. Additionally, there are some parameters here with that RSSI that we can set again. So if we don't even see that the client is meeting this RSSI threshold, we're not going to go ahead and send that to them. We're going to just go ahead and cut them off and wait till they move closer or their RSSI improves. The AP hostname advertisement in Beacon adds the AP's configured hostname to those Beacon frames so that when you're performing a packet capture and you're looking at the analysis, you can actually see the AP hostname in those frame captures. GTK rekey is enabled by default, and it's a security feature that's going to allow the group transit key to be updated periodically through a two-way handshake. This key is used to encrypt the multicast and broadcast traffic between the AP and its clients. Any client that doesn't acknowledge the updated group transit key will be removed from the WLAN. Multicast filter is disabled by default, and when you enable it, it is disabling the ability to turn on multicast rate limiting. Multicast filter and multicast rate limiting are mutually exclusive. When you enable multicast filter, you're basically telling the AP to drop any IPv4 or v6 multicast or broadcast from the associated wireless clients on this network, with a few exceptions. If we hover the question mark, we can see that we're still able to do ARP requests, we can do DHCP, we can do IPv6 neighbor solicitation, IGMP, MLD, and of course, we can still process all unicast packets. So as we said, we're not able to turn on multicast rate limiting if we are using multicast filter. However, we don't have multicast filter applied now, so we can go ahead and turn on the rate limiting. This feature is impacted by the directed multicast broadcast threshold. So if you think you're limiting multicast, but you haven't met that threshold, then you are not limiting multicast until that threshold is met. So just keep in mind that those settings kind of impact each other. Also, you are able to set the multicast rate limits based on radio band. So you can see here that we've got an upload and a download for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. There are some additional callouts here that we can hover. For instance, the multicast download rate limiting should remain below 50% of the BSS min rate. So again, you shouldn't set the multicast download limit higher than 50% of that BSS min rate. You can see here for my 6 gigahertz radios, the multicast rate limiting is grayed out. And if we hover this, we're seeing that it is because this is only going to be operable for WPA3 or opportunistic wireless encryption-based networks. By default, the BSS priority of high means that the WLAN is not going to be restricted in terms of throughput or airtime. However, if you change this to low, this WLAN would have reduced airtime available to it, which then in turn reduces the ability for clients to have higher throughput. So you should really look to only set this to low on WLANs where you want to deprioritize the ability for these clients to have higher throughput, and you want to place other WLANs at a higher priority. The last two settings under the Network tab are for Wi-Fi 7 regarding its operation and interoperability. The first setting here, which is enabled by default, allows devices that are a little bit older or have outdated drivers to still operate in a backwards compatibility fashion with devices that are Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 7. So if you have clients that are a little bit older and you still want them to be able to connect to Wi-Fi 6 and 7 APs, we can enable this feature. It's not going to allow them to utilize and take advantage of the new Wi-Fi 7 features per se, but it will allow for that backwards compatibility. The other feature here is for multi-link operation. So this is all about utilizing multiple radio bands to form a higher bandwidth channel. So as we can see, this is disabled for me because I don't currently have any 6 gigahertz operation enabled on this WLAN or this venue, but if I did, I would be able to go ahead and enable this here, but remember that it does require AP support and it is a Wi-Fi 7 feature. Under the Advanced tab, you will find the DTIM interval. This is a power-saving feature that can be adjusted for devices on your WLAN. So at the default interval of 1, we are saying that every beacon cycle, we'll go ahead and send a DTIM message to wake up any device that is in sleep mode. So the configuration that you see here is not number of seconds, it's how many beacon cycles you want to wait before you send that wake up message to a sleeping client. So you can see as a default of 1, we're calling that lower latency, right? So the devices aren't sleeping very often, so they're going to be quicker to respond. We're not going to let them sleep more than 1 cycle. We can configure this all the way up to 255 cycles. A cycle is roughly 100 milliseconds. What we actually recommend is kind of setting this around a very conservative 1, 2, or 3, and then seeing what the impact to your environment is. There is some benefit to not only the client battery life, but just kind of overall lowering airtime utilization if we let those devices in busy environments sleep for just a little bit longer. The last section here is regarding quality of service, and we can see that we have QoS mirroring enabled for this WLAN by default. QoS mirroring has a few modes that it can operate on, and as you can see by default, it is set for MSCS requests only. Mirrored Stream Classification Service is a protocol that requires a handshake with the client, so client support is also required. But what this will do is allow the client to classify its traffic. The AP will then go ahead and match that classification for the downlink traffic. So the return traffic going back to the client would also be QoS prioritized. And again, when we're talking about QoS, we're talking about being prioritized in one of those 4 classes: voice, video, best effort, or background. However, unique to Ruckus, we also have the ability to set this up on a non-protocol basis. So if we change this to all clients, we are able to do the same QoS mirroring without the need for the client to support MSCS. So in this case, when the AP detects traffic in one of those 4 categories and it places it within it, it's going to keep a track of that. And when that return traffic comes back, it's going to go ahead and place that traffic back in the same prioritization. So in terms of a WLAN that is congested, if you have this enabled and it's working for all clients, those clients that are having those higher priority flows are going to succeed over any traffic that is in those lower priority flows. We also have the idea of QoS map set. So this is disabled by default, but if you enable this, it allows you to change your QoS map priorities to your DSCP ranges, as well as disable any priorities or ranges that you don't want to utilize. We don't recommend making any changes to this unless you have a very specific reason to do so.